Number 10. Fabricio Werdum was scheduled to face Ben Rothwell at UFC 203. However, an injury forced Ben Rothwell out of the fight and was replaced with Travis Browne. In the fight, Fabricio Werdum used his striking and distance to nullify Travis Browne's game plan to win the fight by unanimous decision. After the decision was announced, Travis Browne's coach, Edmond Terverdian, started mouthing off to Fabricio Werdum, in which Fabricio Werdum threw a front kick to push him away. It seemed as though that there was going to be a brawl, but the UFC officials got the whole situation under control. Many fans rejoiced after Fabricio Werdum kicked Edmond Terverdian as he got exactly what he deserved. This incident led fans to suggest that Edmond Terverdian should be the late replacement for Fabricio Werdum after Cain Velasquez pulled out of UFC 207. Number 9. Cris Cyborg Justino had been the most dominant female fighter outside of the UFC. Many fans had thought that they would not see her inside the octagon. Then it was announced that Cris Cyborg would be making a long-awaited debut against Leslie Smith at a 140-pound catchweight bout at UFC 198, where in the fight it took only 90 seconds for Cris Cyborg to TKO Leslie Smith in the first round. She next headlined her first UFC card against Lina Landsberg in Brazil, where in the fight, Cris Cyborg brutalized Lina Landsberg, finishing her by TKO in the second round. She was recently flagged by USADA for failing her out-of-competition drug test due to a diuretic in which she used to cut weight for her catchweight fights this year. She may likely be suspended this year, but once she is cleared to return, and with the UFC creating a 145-pound division, it will be only a matter of time before Cris Cyborg can finally call herself a UFC champion. I believe Cris Cyborg making a UFC debut is one of the best moments of 2016. This is just my opinion, guys, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Number 8. In April of 2016, the Governor of New York, Anthony Cuomo, passed the bill to end the 20-year ban of the sport. The UFC wasted no time in announcing its first date for the first UFC event in New York. As the weeks went on, the fight card became known as UFC 205, where it featured 3 title fights and an overall stacked card. This event produced one of the best fights and went down to be one of the best fight cards of all time. Number 7. Both Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz were scheduled to face each other at UFC 196. Leading up to the event, both fighters did their best to bring attention to the fight with their interviews and their altercations in the press conferences. In the fight, Nate Diaz choked Conor McGregor out in the second round, sending shockwaves across the world. This event did 1.6 million pay-per-view buys, which tied UFC 100 pay-per-view buys. The much anticipated rematch was scheduled for UFC 202. The event gained a lot more attention and everyone wanted to see what would happen in the second contest. In the fight, Conor McGregor won the fight by a majority decision. This event sold 1.65 million pay-per-view buys, breaking both UFC 196 and UFC 100's pay-per-view buys, which became the most sold pay-per-view in UFC history. Number 6. After Conor McGregor was pulled from UFC 200 due to not willing to participate in media obligations, Conor McGregor sent the MMA world into chaos after posting this on his Twitter, saying, "I have decided to retire young. Thanks for the cheese. Catch years later." Just a month later, Conor McGregor unretired and faced Nate Diaz in a rematch, with the Irishman taking the majority decision win. I'm in two minds when I say this is one of the best moments of 2016, but let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Number 5. Miesha Tate came into the UFC as the former Strikeforce Bantamweight champion and was scheduled to face then UFC Bantamweight champion Ronda Rousey for the second time at UFC 168, where in the fight she lost by submission via armbar in the third round. She next put together a 4-fight winning streak, defeating Liz Carmouche, Rin Nakai, Sarah McMahon and Jessica Ai, and earned another title shot against the new champion Holly Holm at UFC 196. In the fight, both fighters were going back and forth and it was a closely contested fight. However, in the 5th round, Miesha Tate quickly sunk in a rear naked choke, choking Holly Holm unconscious, and became the new UFC Bantamweight champion of the world. Number 4. Michael Bisping has had so many ups and downs in his UFC career. He had come so close many times in possibly challenging for the world title, but would always come up short. In early 2016, he put together 3 solid wins over CB Dollaway, Thales Leites and Anderson Silva to be considered for title contention. He finally got his opportunity to fight for the UFC middleweight title at UFC 199 after Chris Weidman was forced to pull out due to suffering a neck injury. In the fight, Michael Bisping used his movement and speed and landed a clean left hook, dropping Luke Rockhold, and followed up with more punches until the fight was stopped in the first round, and he became the new UFC middleweight champion of the world. Number 3. At UFC 207, Cody Garbrandt faced Dominick Cruz for the UFC Bantamweight title, where in the fight, he completely shut down Dominick Cruz's game and won the fight by a unanimous decision, becoming the new UFC Bantamweight champion of the world. In his post-fight interview, he put his new belt around the waist of Maddox Maple, who was a leukemia sufferer and was inspired with his fight with the disease. He said that Maddox helped motivate him to train hard and eventually become the champion. He said the victory was both for himself and for Maddox. Cody Garbrandt, you sir are a legend and you deserve everyone's respect. Number 2. Dominick Cruz was stripped of his UFC Bantamweight title due to suffering a number of knee injuries and his inactivity as the champion. After nearly 3 years away from the sport, he made his comeback against Takeya Mizugaki at UFC 178, where he won the fight by TKO in the first round. The UFC president Dana White announced that Dominick Cruz would face the champion TJ Dillashaw next. However, Dominick Cruz tore his ACL in his other knee and was sidelined for the rest of the year. Dominick Cruz finally made his return in early 2016 at UFC Fight Night 81 and faced then UFC Bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw, where he won the fight by a split decision, winning back the title he never lost. Number 1. After winning a majority decision over Nate Diaz at UFC 202, Conor McGregor next set his eyes on the UFC lightweight title. He mentioned that his plans were to hold both the UFC featherweight and lightweight titles simultaneously, which had never been done before. The UFC announced that the main event of UFC 205 would be Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez for the UFC lightweight championship. In the fight, Conor McGregor looked so relaxed inside the octagon, and he showed his speed and striking was too much for Eddie Alvarez, and eventually finished him by TKO in the second round, becoming the first ever two-weight world champion. It will be interesting to see where the Irish superstar goes from here in 2017.